Well, follow up from episode 0. We have a name.
We have a name.
That was all we accomplished in 90 minutes.
That's all we attempted to accomplish.
That's true. Yeah.
We accomplished exactly as much as we attempted to.
We were very clear about what we wanted to accomplish, and we did.
One for one.
Save it for the show, which I've already seen other, well more accomplished. Is that how I would say that? No. Other popular podcasting people who have been using that phrase after we already locked it down.
There is a show called Save It for the Show.
Oh, is there? Okay. 200
odd episodes, but it's nothing like ours.
Well, nothing exists until I know about it. So,
well, for what it's worth,
I am a heliocentric universe.
For what it's worth, you ever listen to any Slate podcasts?
Any what?
It's from Slate.
Oh, no.
The Slate. So I listen to The Gist, which is a daily show that Mike Pesca does. It's kind of interesting because Mike Pesca's really has been a sports guy. He started as a sports guy, and now he does this news show, but then he really loves sports. I think he used to be on Hang Up and Listen, which is Slate's sports show and sports podcast. And anyways, he just wrote a book called Upon Further Review. Actually, he facilitated the writing of the book. I don't know. Because each chapter is done by different people. I think that he did some of the chapters and other people did other of the chapters, but he helped the idea get started. But it's this what ifs in sports history to say, hey, if this slightly different thing goes on in history, then how different things
what if Draymond Green didn't get suspended for Game 5
right
in the 2016 finals?
Right.
Yeah. Not that this is being recorded, during Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals.
Yes.
In 2018 for, history's sake.
4 minutes to go.
Oh gosh. If you hear any weird groans or I don't even really know why I care. I don't even have an NBA team really, but I guess I do.
I guess you do.
My body tells me that I do the way I get stressed out about. Yeah.
Apparently.
But we have a name. Save it for the show. And I don't care if there's another show called that.
Absolutely. But anyways, so Mike Pesca does a podcast called Upon Further Review that are about certain chapters of the book. Well, I went and subscribed to it today, and there are tons of shows, unsurprisingly, called Upon Further Review.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
Well, we need a media empire that we can, it's not this Save It for the Show. It's whatever our media empire's name is.
Right.
That
it's kind of like how you have websites with the same domain, but as long as they have a different TLD, you're all good.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you know what a TLD is?
No.
Top level domain, I want to say. .com, .net, .org.
Oh, okay.
.pizza.
Yeah. .pizza.
.podcast.
.engineering.
.engineering.
That is a new one that I've seen recently.
Really?
Yeah, because Slack has a blog that is something .engineering.
Okay.
It's really just their Medium blog. They have a blog called Several People Are Typing, which is their consumer blog where they make announcements and whatnot. But they also have their engineering side.
Does it say that in a channel if several people are typing?
That's what it says, yeah.
Okay.
When several people are typing.
Very good, very good.
But this is several people are coding. But it's .engineering. I can't remember what the front end is. But It's interesting. It's all above my head. But I like following the Slack updates because Slack makes my life better at work and my personal life. Me and my wife. We talked about this in episode 0.
Yes.
We chat on Slack. Anytime I post a picture of
so
us,
you have a Slack that is just you and your wife.
Well, no, it needs to be. It's not, but it needs to be.
It's just madness.
It is, yeah. But people harass me. They're like, if I post something, if I take a screenshot of a conversation we're having and I post it, people are like, do you really talk to your wife on Slack? What is that? What's that about?
Nothing wrong with Slack. They should harass you about the fact that...
Well, they don't have to know about that other part. Only you or others need to know about that. But it just makes my life easier because it's all... Right. I live in that app all day for various work-related activities, and just it's easier to bring my family-related activities in there too.
It's good. It's good.
Okay, I know we have a good topic tonight that I'm excited to talk about, and I'm excited about probably next week too, because I figure that's going to be some kind of WWDC guessery.
Yeah,
because it's getting close.
Yeah, you want to. So, I don't know if this. What's the phrase I'm looking for? Buries the lead, like the opposite of buries the lead. But do we want to talk about the iPhone SE2 rumors before we get into history?
I mean,
which
I know it's going to come up for you.
I mean, we can save that for next week if we want to.
Well, I think we can tease it.
So,
or you're just gonna go down the rabbit hole.
You've seen the rumor from like a week and a half ago.
I have, but I didn't even look at it because I just figured, you know what, Philip's gonna tell me all about it.
It just doesn't even seem real. Why is this case
what
manufacturer? So there's this case manufacturer who has been right about a number of different dimensions of phones before, like early on, before they've been released. They've kind of said, hey, we're making this case. It's going to need dimensions. And they've been right about it. I think even like the iPhone 10, so like new stuff that's not like, well, you got the iPhone 8 right after the iPhone 7. Like, give yourself a big pat on the back for that, right? Oh, you thought the camera may get bigger from the 6 to the 7? Well, thumbs up. But so, I mean, you know, like brand new form factors they've been right about. Mm-hmm. Well, they're saying that basically with their design, they're saying that the iPhone SE2 is going to be a iPhone 10 style iPhone SE sized device, which is just rude and mean because
it's your dream.
It doesn't make a lick of sense.
It's your dream phone
that they would invest the top technology in a device that really, like, the whole point of it is for stragglers who don't care.
It depends on what you mean by top technology, because it may not be full on 10 style, meaning probably wouldn't be an OLED screen, but it would have the front cameras, the Face ID cameras.
Like if you go Face ID, and it just doesn't make any sense that they would invest that much in that form factor.
Well, it does if they charge more than $349 for the phone.
Of course, they would have to at that point, but that just kind of ruins the whole real point of the phone, because the phone is not meant to be the best phone for me, even though that would be the best phone for me.
That doesn't make any sense.
So I had this 8 from work that we talked about a month ago, and it's a two-handed device, and I don't really want a two-handed phone. I love the size of the SE. I just wish it was all display. Like
the SE all display. Phone. I think it could still be a one-handed phone.
No, it would absolutely be a one-handed phone. Absolutely. But it just has no real reason to exist, I don't think.
Well, I think it does if the plan is that all the phones will eventually be all display. Because the other rumor is for the fall that there are going to be the 8S models, if you will, are also going to be all display, but LCD.
Right.
So they'll still be a little cheaper.
That's also a weird rumor.
I mean, once you open Pandora's box, it's got to spread out, especially if in 2 weeks we see new iPads teased.
That's true.
That are basically full display. It's going to happen.
But do you think if the iPhone SE2 was going to be the greatest device ever
for you?
No, that would just be the greatest device ever. Yes, it would be the greatest device ever for me, but yeah, for me especially. But do you feel like that would? I think that would make it more likely that it gets released in the fall with the rest of them rather than in June.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Like, would it be, because then who would buy, for one, who would buy any 8s until now, but between now and September, when they could buy this SE that fits their hand better and is still all display, where the 8's not. It's the same old iPhone that we've had for forever. Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Like, but if they're going to tip their cap as to here's the SE2 coming in September and it's all display, well, then why wouldn't they already just start showing the other stuff too? Like they wouldn't just show one if they're not going to release it somewhat soon. They already missed their March deadline, right? I mean, that's when the original SE came out.
I mean, there are no more deadlines for Apple. They will sell things for the longest time.
Well, it's like these stupid red phones every spring now. Well, every spring, the last two springs. They bring in, like, who buys those? I mean, really, why? Who they would sell way more of them if they had that color option in the fall.
Yes.
Who buys those red phones?
People, I mean, I don't see. Have you ever seen a red iPhone SE?
Not an SE. I've seen.
I'm sorry.
I'm like, wait, are you breaking
red
news?
iPhone 7.
I have seen a red iPhone 7. Yeah, it's not for me.
Well, the red iPhone 7 had the white front,
right?
Which you
And
actually don't mind. Do you have a white front now?
Yes. I don't.
No,
because all the 10s are black on the front.
Oh, that's right.
White on the back. Yeah.
That's right. But you had a white front.
I did, yeah, when I had my 6.
When you had your 6.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the white front?
I didn't even think about it until I heard people talk about it. Like it was never even a thing to me. And then once I heard someone talk about, you can just, it's so much more glaring as to where, oh gosh. Basketball update. It's so much more glaring now where the screen actually is, in terms of it just doesn't seem like this seamless experience on the front of your phone when you have a black front. But it didn't bother me until someone pointed that out. I just primarily liked the color better than and more so the silver finish on the back than the matte black, or well, I say the black or the space gray or whatever it was, on the 6 and the 5S. Now, when I had my 7 and they came out with that matte black option, I was all about that. And I really liked how that looked. Just the whole phone itself, just the way it looked. But now you don't have to worry about that with the 10. And for these red people, whoever these people are that buy red phones, they fixed that problem on the 8 of, hey, let's use the black front because that's going to look a lot better. And I mean, I don't know. I just don't want a red phone. They tried this experiment, right, with the 5C, right, where, hey, let's add all these fun colors to phones. And
I don't think that was a problem with the 5C, though, because the plastic 5C is a great phone to hold.
Never held it.
It's a great phone to hold.
Says
it doesn't have the sharp,
person who loves the SE.
Of course, well, it didn't have the sharp edges. Like, it has sharp enough edges, you don't have to have a case on it, sort of thing. But it doesn't have as sharp an edge. Because I mean, my SE will dig into my palm if you hold it a certain way. Because I mean, these corners are not rounded at all. They're chamfered, right? But they're not rounded at all.
Why did we even get on this topic? Because you brought up the SE2 because you're not burying the lead. You're like digging up the lead out of the grave to show a little early.
Really, the whole reason that I ever wanted to talk about our history with computers is that I feel like I end up liking these devices that are not the premier devices, not like the most invested in devices. And it's tough for me because I would just love to be on board with what is going to be most invested in, because that's a great place to be. But I just tend off of that.
Well,
pretty often.
It's like you in any other situation where, something, you get hung up on something and you cannot let it go.
Yeah, there's a good bit of that.
It happens with your devices too. Like, you want a one-handed device. You want to be able to do everything you want to do with one hand. And so when they made the move to the 4.7-inch phone, it just kind of blew up your worldview and made things difficult. And then it just keeps getting worse because the 10, it's even more challenging. Well, actually, I think the 10, the way it works is like there's no messing around anymore. Like it is a two-handed phone for anything that you need to do in the upper third of the screen. Like that's just how it is. Stuff at the bottom of the screen you can handle with one hand, but once you get mid to that top third, like unless you want to drop it,
even if you're going to type on that wide of a phone, like that is not comfortable for me to do one-handed.
Well, why? That's a whole other conversation, though, because
you're saying your keyboard is in the bottom.
You're one of those people that tries to type with one hand. I don't understand that either.
I type with one hand, and it's totally wonderful on the SE.
I've never done it.
I use Gboard, and I use swipe typing, and it's just wonderful.
But I just can't. I can't. This is like having a far right Republican and a far left Democrat. We're never going to get on the same worldview about this because I don't really understand what the appeal is of typing with one hand. Like, what does that do for you?
Because you only have to use one hand for your phone. If you have one hand occupied, then you're done. Plus, the tough part about it, and this gets us to the iPad mini, which we'll get into.
Wait, what?
Which is another one of the devices that has not been invested in, will not be invested in. There will never be another one released. And that is my favorite iPad to use because I like to hold my iPads, and that's my favorite iPad to hold because that is a great size to use two-handed. Even like
I thought you just wanted to use things with one hand.
Well, you can't use an iPad with one hand. So
what do you mean? I'll pull up this 12.9-inch iPad Pro with one hand and
right. I mean,
12.9
is so good to use on a desk. On your lap. It is terrible to use holding it. Like it is way too big.
Like lying in bed watching Netflix.
You can't split the freaking keyboard, which is just totally dumb because you especially need it on that one because it is so crazy to try to type on the iPad Pro if you're holding it. It's just bananas. But anyways, so I really like my favorite one-handed device is the iPhone SE and my favorite two-handed device is the iPad mini. And both of these are just this totally limiting factor on actually being a good device.
Let me guess, your favorite Mac is a Mac Mini.
I'm not giving that away yet.
Okay. By the way, if you're wondering, our topic for this show is our history with computers. And this is going to get very broad because already you're talking about iOS devices, which shame on you.
So let's get straight into that.
iPhones. What are you talking about?
Let's
Tablets being computers? Come on.
So the first time that I thought about what actually is a computer
was when you saw the Apple commercial.
No. Was back in the day. I mean, that's a good commercial. Was back in the day when iPad sales used to be insane. It's crazy how insane iPad sales were.
When they first hit, yeah.
When they first hit. It was just bananas.
And iPad too.
And the most interesting part about that was that they didn't take long at all to exceed the Mac in sales. I mean, in sales over a quarter, like easy. I mean, first quarter, they sold more iPads than Macs. But then over time, you ended up with more iPads out there being used than Macs, like pretty quickly. And so John Gruber used to talk about how, well, if you compare PC and Mac market share, yes, Mac still only has like 5% market share, 6% market share. I mean, it rose a little bit. It would actually gain number of devices while PCs, like they would sell more than they did last year when PCs were selling less than they did last year. So they were gaining on PCs, getting into 6% and 7%. But what he would say is, listen, that's because Apple just cares about profit in the premium market. So they have this small part of market share and a huge part of profit. But if you take into account iPads, which cost $500 back in the day, $500 to start off with, up to $130 plus for cellular models and $100 for this amount of memory.
Yeah,
and
I
all
think
that.
my first iPad that I purchased, it was like, ended up being like almost $900 because I got an LTE, and
We'll talk about that.
yeah.
So what Gruber would share is, hey, if you combine these two, okay, if you're looking at a $500 iPad, $500 to $800, $900 iPad, that's like an expensive PC laptop at this point. Like, what's the reason for not counting that in computer market share? Like, why shouldn't we combine the Macs and the iPads to form this joint number of devices? And then that gets you to whatever percentage it was, 25, 30, 35% of the market, Like, why doesn't that count as a computer?
Because it doesn't have any USB inputs. Okay.
So it's interesting to me.
Or an SD card slot.
Especially when you start thinking about the history of computers, like what you use computers for originally, all of that,
all the spreadsheets
can be done on iOS. Well, really, just like getting on the internet, playing games, and just reading stuff on the internet. Accessing information from the internet. That's just easier and more enjoyable to do on an iOS device, in large part.
Are you wanting me to agree?
You can agree or disagree.
I have to be the guy that's like, tablets can't be computers, Philip, unless it's a Windows convertible touchscreen thing, 3-in-1, whatever the third thing is. I don't know, but they say 3-in-1. Seriously,
really?
What's the third thing? I don't know.
3-in-1?
I feel like I've seen something like that before. It says 3-in-1.
I don't know about that.
I could be making it up. I don't know.
2-in-1 is the thing.
I don't know what Windows does anymore. It's not my life. Every day at work, I hear someone complain about their laptop not working correctly. And I'm just like, hey, everything's sunny all the time, always over here in Macland. And they're just, oh, Levi, that's funny. No, it's not. It's not funny. It's actually horrifying that you hate your computer that you spend more time with every day than your family or your loved ones. And it's just okay that it's terrible. And you're just like, what is YOLO? Yeah, every day this happens. And I get stern looks from certain people who are like, my PC's fine. Like, okay. That's because you know what you're doing on it. And most people don't. It's a losing battle. I haven't converted anyone in all my time. In my 7 years at this company. Haven't converted a single soul.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm going to get to the pearly gates of computers. And the great processor in the sky is going to be like, Levi, you converted no one to Macs. So you could have tried harder, bud. And I'm going to say, no, I couldn't. Without forcibly taking it from their hands, I couldn't. Okay, so let's get focused here.
Not even Liz. Liz didn't go with the Mac.
No. And
really,
she had her chance.
Really disappointing.
She had her shot.
She would have loved it.
And I think mostly she didn't because she knew it would bother me even more if she never did. So we don't even get to that topic anymore because it's too painful. All right. Main topic, personal history with computers. You're already telling me some crazy nonsense about tablets and smartphones being computers. I'll play along with that for now. I really do think so.
They're all computers.
We'll get to that. I want to know, what is your first memory with a computer at all?
This is a great question. This is a question I was going to ask you. I'm glad you want to start here. I think my first experience of a computer, I think it was seeing the Macs they had at the library, which, as far as I knew, we only used as a much better version of Card Catalog. I think they were probably running like System 7. This is when I was like 6 years old, probably. But I don't know. We had a computer when I was like 5. So it was a combination of the Macs at the library that just had all the card catalog information on them, but you could just search them straight up. You just use your fields, keyword, author, title, whatever it was, and hit search.
You didn't use the Dewey Decimal?
I mean, my mom taught me about it because she was like, this is important. You got to know this. And I was like, but I can just put it in the box and hit the round rect. And
my first memory of a computer is I was in first grade, buzzed head, because that's what I did during, anytime it was warm. And I had a paw, like a panther paw, buzzed into my. You ever do that? You ever get the designs or logos, like no Nike swoosh in the side of your head?
No logos.
The only reason I remember this is because there's a picture in the yearbook because it was a big deal that we had computers. I was in the first grade, so this would have been, I don't know, like maybe 1994, 95, somewhere in there. And we had a computer in our classroom. So it was like everyone in first grade had at least one computer, in the classroom. And it was some reading games, I don't even know what it was. I don't think it definitely wasn't a Mac because it had legit learning games on it. The
Mac had incredible learning games. We can get to that.
I'm sure they did, but these looked like
third graphic,
massively produced and sold software to schools.
The Mac was early on. The Mac had some really, like the Oregon Trail, I think, was originally on the Mac, if I'm not mistaken, but I may be mistaken.
Well, if you make mistakes on Oregon Trail, it doesn't end well.
That's true.
Even if you do it perfectly, it usually doesn't end well for everyone.
I got pretty good at the Oregon Trail.
I have no idea what it was, but I'm almost positive it wasn't a Mac. But yeah, we had a computer in our first grade classroom. Mrs. Melton let me get on it a lot because I would usually finish work early and
such a smart boy.
Idle hands. And so that's my first memory, and it's etched in stone in my first grade yearbook with my panther paw etched into to the side of my buzzed head.
That's awesome.
Now I do remember my grandparents having a computer. I don't know if this was like before that or after that, but I was still pretty young then. And I'm going to say it was after because just where they lived at the time, it had to have been after first grade. I'm pretty sure it was a Mac, but I don't know what kind of Mac it was. But it had this weird, drawing app where you could change the cursor and it would do all these weird kaleidoscope type things where you would, move and it would instead of just drawing in one direction where you were moving the cursor, it would do it 4 times in, 4 different directions. And you could make some really cool art this way.
Nice.
And I'm pretty sure it was a Mac. I don't know. I don't remember what it was. I wish that I had it, because it had to have been given away at some point or, just, I'm sure they didn't sell it. But I missed that thing, and I wish I knew what happened to it. No idea. Maybe it was an Apple II. I don't know. Probably not. But I don't know what they were selling in that time frame. But I had a lot of fun on that computer.
Very good. What was the first computer you had at home?
That's the thing and this kind of goes into a larger point, is that none of these are memorable to me. They were just some random cheap PC because we didn't have a lot of money to be spending on computers. But we always had a computer. It was that was the time when it was a big computer setup somewhere in the house. You had the big desk thing with the huge monitors, and it had to be set up in a certain place because that's where your phone line was coming in.
True.
But I couldn't tell you any of the brands. Or I just know they were Windows, PCs, and they were just generally terrible from just because they were cheaper computers. So, not a lot of processing power and everything took forever because we had really cheap internet, yeah.
Oh yeah.
And, getting on Kazaa was difficult and whatever Limelight, I think was a thing, back when I was burning CDs and 6th and 7th grade for all my...
After Napster.
Yeah, I mean, I did use Napster, yeah. But I didn't use that as long because I couldn't use that as long.
Yeah.
But I have no recollection of what they were, what models, like I didn't even know what processors or RAM or any of that stuff was when I was that age. But I think most of it is because they didn't make an impact on me. They were just PCs that did a certain function and had no real impact on me beyond that. But we always, I don't know when we got our first computer, but I just feel like we always had a computer. I know that's not true, but after, having the computer in school at first grade, it just seemed like we always had one at home. But I know that couldn't be the case, but I think from second grade on, when we moved into a different house, I always remember that house having a computer. And, it changed over the years, like every 2 or 3 years, we'd have to get a new one because it had died some horrible death because no one in our family knew how to work on computers in terms of like troubleshooting. And, that was big business for little PC, repair shops. I remember taking them to little shops in town, because they actually could make money off of these services back then. But
well, it is crazy back then how much of a difference 2 years, 3 years would make in just the speed of a processor or the amount of memory you'd get or even hard drive space. I mean, everything was just exponentially growing. I mean, Moore's Law was in full effect.
Yeah. Now, I remember Windows 95 for a long, long time. And then, eventually moving up to XP. But I really don't remember anything, after XP because, well, for one, in my personal life, I eventually got a Mac, and then I, had nothing to do with Windows personally. And then, once I got out of college and got some real jobs, we were still using XP even then at those jobs. And then I think I would use Windows 7 for, I guess, briefly before I finally got to switch to a Mac at work. But it's just like one ongoing.
Not all that briefly. You used Windows 7 for 2 years.
Did I?
Yeah.
See, but that's what I mean when I say that's how memorable that operating system is to me, that it just all seems like just one continuous experience of Windows that I could easily forget.
So we'll go back from this because obviously this is jumping forward quite a bit, but I do remember when Megan was in town at one point and she had her Mac, and I don't know how it happened, but I was talking about Macs and PCs in some form or fashion, I'm sure. And she just said, well, if you want to use a Mac, why don't you just ask them to get you a Mac? I was like, well, can I just do that? And so I just asked probably Wes, maybe Jim, but probably Wes, just like, hey, what would it take for me to get a Mac and just like give them back my PC? He was like, well, we can just talk to Bart and we can probably get it done. And then I came back, I think I just told you, and you just gave me this look of like, you were like, that's all we have to do?
That's all we have to do?
That's it?
Well, part of it for me too is at the time I was teaching SQL, and I could do it on a Mac. Like I could get SQL Developer and all that, but it just was a hassle. And at that time too, like they weren't as common in the enterprise yet. Now it's not percentage wise. I don't know how many people there, have Macs in terms of the entire population, but it's a much larger number than it was certainly then when we switched. But once I stopped teaching SQL and I didn't have to worry about, any slight hangups I might have connecting to those databases, once that was over, I was just like, all right, like, where's my Mac? Because I don't want to do this anymore.
That may have been like a year in. Like I may have been a year in at Axiom when I did that. So I may have used that Dell for a year. And I do remember like when I came on, it was like managers had MacBook Airs if they wanted to. Yeah. Like that was pretty much it. And I guess Megan had one because she was doing all this design work, and Sebastian had one. But really, it was like, if you're in Conway and you're just doing stuff, like, nah.
Well, and it's the same way now. Like, now that I'm back in HR and I look around the floor, I'm the only Mac up there.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no reason for any of them to have a Windows PC. I mean, they could easily
That's true.
have Macs, because now all of our systems are in the cloud. You know, like they don't use any proprietary tools in their roles that, you know, homegrown company built tools that only work on PC.
Right.
But that's just what they've always had. I guess it's just what they're comfortable with. And I think about it sometimes when I'm making these jokes about, like, just come over to the light, you know, when they're complaining about whatever is going on with their Dell. But, you know, they've been using Windows for 20 plus years at this point. And I guess I can kind of understand once you reach a certain threshold of, like, I guess that would be intimidating, but I don't remember feeling that, you know, whenever I made the switch over in my personal life. All I had ever used was Windows, you know, for 10 years, I guess, you know, growing up, going through school. Now, I don't, other than the experience at my grandparents', I don't ever remember seeing Macs, even in like our computer lab.
But you never really invested in Windows. You never
Certainly
really had
not with my own money.
but you never really had a reason to really want to know how to work with Windows well to get something done. Right. And I mean, people with jobs, I don't really understand non-technical users very much, but people with jobs, you know, that for 20 years have been figuring out these are the things I do with the computer and this is the way that I do them. You know, I mean, I guess there's some comfort.
So your first experience with a Mac was at the library.
So my very first experience was at the library, but I mean, that was almost kind of a pseudo experience. I mean, like, you could tell, like, it was just this. I mean, the System 7 design language is interesting. It's just very gray, rounded recs, already as for the buttons. But I mean, it was just for the card catalog system. Like, and you could like minimize the card catalog, and like you could try to click on stuff and you'd be like, nope, no, you can't do that. And I mean, I would try, but you could like Windows shade it. So that was always cool, because that's just a cool thing.
Really cool. Yeah, I'm sure it was just, you know, the height of coolness at the time.
It was awesome. Windows shade. Oh, I wish that was still a thing. You know what window shading is?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, so back in System 7 and 8 and 9, I think, all the way up through there, you could, so instead of minimizing a window down to, there was no dock back then, but down to a dock like you do now, you would just hit what would be the minimize button, and it would roll into itself, and you would just have the title bar of the window. And so then, in all of Syracuse's glory, you could just keep your Windows titles where they were, but just roll them up if you wanted to see what was below them. And then you could just roll them back down if you click that button again. And it was awesome.
I could see the benefit in that.
It was great to use. But so I would just, I'd just sit there, I'm sure, and just like window shade back and forth and back and forth.
Well, when was the first time you had a Mac in your home?
Oh, the first time I had a Mac in my home was when my home was my dorm room in college.
Oh, okay, so it was much later.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, okay, so I say that was my home. Just down the street from my home, and this home, since I live next door to where I grew up, then my best friend growing up was the son of a computer science professor at UCA. And
yeah, you talked about how he was your best friend.
Yes.
Last time. Yes. In the much fabled episode 0.
Correct. So Wayne Brown was a computer science professor at UCA, and so they had a Mac because Wayne Brown knew what computers were and knew what was good, and so they had a Mac. And I think that was probably Mac like OS 8 that I used at their house. I don't know what it was. I mean, this would have been when I was like 7 or 8. So we're talking like 1995, 96, 97. But I mean, I remember like their computers, for one thing, it was really nice because if their computer was ever on, like, it used to be like when your computer was on the fritz, like you would just like call somebody, you would pay somebody like quite a bit of money to just like come in and like find the virus that was on there, or, you know, take out the bad RAM chip and put a new RAM chip in. I mean, whatever it may be, you know, the litany of problems you could have there. Or a lot of times it was just like some configuration thing that you clicked the wrong thing and now your PC was just like, nope.
Yeah, you just had to
you got to unclick that before I do anything else.
Completely restore the entire computer.
Right, right, which is usually what it ended up doing. So it was always awesome because it's not like Macs never have issues, and like their Mac would have issues. And so James, my friend, would be like, well, I guess my dad will have to look at it tonight and then we'll just have to play with it tomorrow. So that was always awesome because Wayne Brown always knew what was going on. So like he would know how to get this problem fixed. But I mean, it was just always interesting to use. And so I saw how Macs were used, and I used it a little bit at the Brown's house. And then our pastor has always used Macs. And so he started out when he joined in 98 at our church, 97. He started out with an iMac G3, and then eventually had an iMac G4, which is like the greatest looking desktop ever. Have you ever seen an iMac G4?
I probably have.
Affectionately called the iLamp.
Oh yeah,
where
yeah.
It just has like a hemispherical base, and then it has the arm with the LCD monitor on it. Looks a lot like it reminds me of a Luxo.
Pixar. Yeah,
Pixar lamp. So it was awesome just because, like, I mean, LCD monitors were not a thing in like 02, 03 or whenever the iMac G4 came out. It was just like, oh, it was just sweet because it wasn't like, I mean, there was not, I mean, because the iMac G3 is this incredible thing that is like, oh yeah, that's your CRT monitor, that's your computer, right? Done, full stop. And now they come out with this thing. It's like not even a CRT monitor anymore, and still your computer. Period. Full stop. So I used to use that. I used to use that computer a good bit with my friend Jordan, his son, and like after church every day while we were waiting for our parents to talk to all their friends after church, we would just run up there and play games on the pastor's computer, and then I would use it at their house. Like they had Macs at their house too that we would use. And so I mean, I always enjoyed using Macs, and I mean,
I just always assumed that you had them at an earlier age.
That's interesting. So I grew up in the home. We had a Windows 3.1 computer. This is probably when I was like 5 or 6. And I feel like maybe like my grandparents had that at first, which wouldn't make any sense really. So maybe that's not true, but I think it was like a Packard Bell maybe is what pops to mind. But it was this Windows 3.1 computer, and it was, I don't even think we had the internet. Like it was interesting because you talk about computers at school. So I was homeschooled till 9th grade. So I had a computer at school, but it was at home.
Yeah.
And, but I mean, that's probably one reason why we had computers and we kept them up decently well.
That's one thing. Like,
and we would use them quite a bit too, because we would use them for schoolwork. Like we would use them to type out papers, and we would use them, like we had an Encarta, which is this encyclopedia on a CD-ROM. And so, I mean, we would use that for research. Like we would research on our computer. But I mean, it was Encarta 94, I remember. And so, I mean, this was before we had internet. Like we didn't get internet until we got our Dell that had Windows 95 on it in like 95 or 96. And that's when we got dial-up internet along with the Dell. And that was awesome. I mean, I remember using Napster especially. And the crazy thing, I just remember using Napster was such a formative experience because you would find these songs and you would have to spell them correctly. I remember looking for Metallica songs for the longest time, but I could never spell Metallica correctly.
So you're the reason that Napster went down.
Of course. I remember like for the longest time, I kept searching and I would do it like day after day. I'd be like, why am I not getting any results? for Metallica, like it ended up like I had too many T's or too many L's or not enough L's, or because it's interesting because like there was no like approximate search like you probably meant this. It's like no, we're
no
just
regex
we're searching
going on.
exactly like no approximations. Like yes, we will search that exact string for you. Did not find it.
Nothing,
right? Nothing. And you would with me with my 56K connection, right? I would try to find any offers with like T1 connections, whatever that even is.
Yeah.
I still don't really know what a T1 connection is.
It's just awesome. That's all you got to.
It's just awesome. Yeah. Apparently, I mean, it was better than like cable broadband. Apparently. It was
code for we're going to destroy your computer. But so you'll get this song.
So you would queue them all up though, right? Before you went to sleep at night is what I would do.
Yeah.
I would queue them all up and then you would wake up in the morning and you would see what failed and what succeeded. And sometimes it was like everything failed. I don't think it was ever that everything succeeded because things would just
or everything was still going.
But it was just, I mean, it's amazing. Like, I mean, if you ever get on Edge on your phone, like if you're just in like the middle of nowhere or if you're on Sprint like me, then I mean, it's amazing how, and this is a whole story of the web. It's just like, you can't get anything to load. Like it just times out at this point. So I mean, it's amazing how much was done over 56K modems and like 56 kilobit per second internet. I mean, just bananas.
Yeah.
So we had Windows 3.1, we had Windows 95, and then we got another Dell that had Windows 98 on it. And that was probably like 98 or 99. And eventually we got Windows XP on it in like 2001, 2002. And so yeah, I mean, we kept up with the operating systems and had like decently fast computers.
I don't really know. Just like looking at my family, I don't really know. I guess it was me. Like, I guess I was the reason we had computers. I don't really know why else we had them so early and would, keep investing in them because none of us knew how to really work them. I mean, I was like the lead in the house just because I was getting exposed to them young in school and then just figuring it out, not knowing how any of it worked or understanding any of the ins and outs of it. But I'm just glad that they kept investing in them because, like now it's not as big of a deal. Like it's more ubiquitous. But then when, this was still like kind of a new thing and certainly not everyone had internet access. And I'm just glad that like I had those opportunities, even though they were terrible computers, like at least we had them because I just don't know like what I would be doing or what I would be interested in now if I hadn't had them in the house at such a young age and like being exposed to them.
So that being said, which is totally true. Can you imagine having had an iPad when you were 4 years old?
This is our kids' lives.
8 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they don't. To our kids, iPads are totally computers. They are. I mean, that's what my kids call them. They call them computers. Occasionally, Kanan will say tablet, but for the most, they're just like, "Hey, what are you doing on your computer?" And I'm like, "Oh, child." But that these are definitely computers to them. Like they see no difference, And occasionally we will try and get Kanan, our oldest now, to start using a laptop just a little bit, just to get exposed to like what it feels like to use a mouse or to use the trackpad, and just because. Yeah, I can't imagine what it must be like to having your first experience on an internet device or, whatever you want to call it, being a touch experience and not, a keyboard and a mouse. It's just such a different mind shift. But for them, it's not like that is their paradigm now. Mm-hmm. And it's funny how trying to get him to experience a laptop or a traditional, more traditional feeling computer experience he's still interested in it, but it's just like, it's probably like how it was watching us try and use just computers in general and how it's like, not knowing what to do or how to work it. That's what I see in him, but, give him a tablet and he's just like, he's all over the place. And it's so much more intuitive for them to just pick it up and go and learn the gestures. And like, I don't even have to tell them. They just learn them. And I don't know, man, it trips me out sometimes.
Yeah.
But these are computers to them. No doubt about it. They're computers to me too, but it's just a different experience. And so you didn't have, you had access to Macs being young. You had that exposure. My first exposure to a Mac was my senior year of high school. Never really, other than the experience that I think was a Mac at my grandparents' when I was really little, but I'm not even 100% sure on that. I'm pretty sure, though, having seen screenshots of, like the old operating systems, it looked like those. But yeah, we were on a choir trip my senior year, and this would have probably been, I don't know, like March time frame, about to graduate. But we went on some kind of trip or tour or something. And one of my friends, one of my choir friends, we were like really friends. You know what I mean? Like, how you have work friends and you have choir friends or whatever you did in high school. I don't know, band friends, whatever it is. We were rooming together, and he had, let's just say, he was a rich kid, right? Like, he just was. That's just what it was. But he had his own laptop. I don't know what it was. I mean, it must have been, it was obviously before they made the move to Intel. So, I mean, what would that have been? Just like a pretty standard.
Before they made the move to
Intel?
Intel?
Like right before it.
2006.
Yeah, no, I know the year, but like what would the laptop have been then?
Oh, the iBook.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. But like just seeing that and like seeing the things he was doing and some of the apps he was using that I'd never heard of before, and like just some of the functions he was doing, which obviously you could do on Windows, but it was just the ease of how he was doing them. And then moving over to iTunes, and I had exposure to iTunes because my first Apple device was an iPod, but iTunes on a PC was a much different experience than iTunes on a Mac. And it was just like how pretty the operating system was, and just how visually interesting things were. And a dock, like I had no idea what that was. I was like, what is this black magic that you're showing me? And I mean, I knew as soon as I saw it and he let me like do a few things on it. I mean, this was just like an hour or two that I spent with this iBook. I knew instantly like that's what I was going to get for college. Because I mean, we'd already been having talks about getting a laptop and all that. Like I already knew where I was going to college and all that stuff was all lined out. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm getting an Apple laptop. Like I'm going to spend way more money. Like I know that. But I'm making this switch. Like this is going to be the first computer that's mine, and we never had laptops. It was always desktop computers at the home, and I just knew like if I'm getting to choose what I want, even after an hour, I'm like, this is it. Like, this is what I'm doing. And, so that summer before I went to college, they announced the MacBooks, and I got a black MacBook, the first one that was like $200 more for no reason other than it was black.
Had 120 gigabyte hard drive.
Okay, yeah.
Up from 80 gigabytes, the white one.
But
yeah, it was $150 more.
Well, whatever. Okay. I didn't care. That's what I wanted. That's what I was going to get. And so that was my first Apple computer, my first Mac. And I've never looked back. In personal devices, obviously, first few real jobs out of college, I just had whatever they gave me. But yeah, that black MacBook, which was, I guess those were the first machines that had Intel, because that was like a big promotional thing that they were, putting on everything. I didn't even know what any of that meant. Like it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't even really understand processors or any of that stuff. But yeah, I got the most expensive MacBook that I could get without going, to the pro level, because those 17-inch machines were behemoths. I didn't know what to do with those. But
so real time follow up.
Okay.
The white MacBook had 120. The black MacBook had 160.
Oh, okay.
And it was $200.
Not
150.
I was right. So hashtag Levi was right. I had to get a loan.
So
my first loan.
Really?
Yeah, I had to get a loan to buy it. Because we didn't have. It was like $1,800 when it was all said and done, and I got some help, but nobody. We didn't have that money lying around before I went to college. I mean, luckily I had scholarships, so we didn't have to pay for any of that. Mm-hmm. And then I think I paid it right off, like the first excess aid check that I got. But it was my first banking experience of getting a loan and all that business. But I had that thing for 5 years, and I mean the only reason I got a new. I got a MacBook Pro in 2011. It wasn't because anything was wrong with the MacBook. I could have kept using it, but I just had some extra cash and wanted to upgrade, my machine and some of the work I was starting to do then. But man, that thing was faithful to the end. I ended up selling it for $100 to a college, to someone who was about to go to college. And that was my first love. You never forget them.
Those are good machines.
The biggest problem with that machine was that it was like plastic, or whatever the material was, and it had it had these like little ridges.
Very sharp wrist rests. Very sharp wrist rests.
Well, but on the top too, like they had these little ridges at the top, and I guess from just being in my bag so much, it started to wear down on the on the bottom, like on the keyboard, and it actually made indentions from those ridges pressing into the bottom to where the plastic actually broke in the same size as those ridges. And then stuff would get down there, and eventually I had to have the whole keyboard replaced. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the only major thing I had to spend money on for repairs. And then it just happened again because, but once it happened again, I just put tape over them, and I just like put plain tape over to keep, stuff from getting down there. Yeah. But, man, that machine was my first, and so when I came in, it was already, Mac OS 10, whatever they called it then. I mean, it wasn't Mac OS,
Tiger.
But it was, 10.6.
10.4.
Was it 4? I don't know. I remember that it was Tiger, yeah. And I never really experienced any of the other previous, 9, 8, or 7 or whatever. So, I mean, my first experience coming in was on 10. But
so, usability, longevity of Macs versus PCs?
No comparison.
Anecdotally. So, Blair, my wife... in 6th grade, her parents bought her a computer to use for school, and she got an iMac G3, purple iMac G3 in 6th grade. So that would have been like right when they came out.
She didn't want the bonsai blue?
98. I guess not. She wanted a purple one. She probably wanted a green one, and they were like out. So she got a purple one, and her brother got like some Dell desktop. Well, he had like 3 of them from that point so she got the last iBook, the 14-inch iBook. So her parents, I was not enough in the picture at this point to start giving her parents advice to say, hey, wait, because they bought her 14-inch iBook in like March or April of 2006, before she went to college in the fall, like he did. So, but it was a good machine.
It's funny that you talk about like, longevity there, right? So Brittany goes to college. My wife, Brittany, she goes to college a year before me, right? And she's going through the same exercise that I would eventually go through, right? Of I got to get a laptop, and I want to say, I don't know what she did that first year. I don't know if she bought one or if she was just borrowing one or what happened. But I want to say when I came to college the next year and I had my MacBook, and I think she actually bought a laptop that year before, so I was there too. And, she just had to buy some cheap Dell because that's all that that's all that she could afford at the time. And I just remember feeling so bad for her because I didn't know anything really about specs or any of that stuff, but I just knew it's a really cheap laptop. It's not going to hold up, something's going to happen. And I mean, it was just a month or two and it was almost unusable. And, we couldn't even figure out what was killing it. It was just some software issue. And she just ended up using my MacBook all the time. We were engaged, we were always together. And, but I just remember feeling so bad because it was she had to buy it because it was just all that it was the only option at the time. And it would, it would become kind of a sensitive subject between us because, the first few times I'd be like, well, I should have got an Apple. And obviously she couldn't, I quickly learned that I needed to tone that down a little or a lot. But then she started using my MacBook and, it was a learning curve for her, but it worked, she never had any problems with it. And then, we got married that summer after that year. And so from then on, it was just I don't think she ever even opened that Dell again. I don't even know what happened to it. It probably just ended up in a yard sale somewhere. And I hate that for people, that they know they need a computer, but they don't know. They just really don't know. And they just go back with what's familiar. And I mean, I know it's hard, right? It's hard to go to that next level in terms of spending. And if you don't have it, you don't have it. But that's the number one thing I would tell people. Anytime I have a conversation about that and they're like, well, but they're so much more expensive for really not, not even any more in terms of specs. People just look at specs now and they're like, hey, why would I spend $500 more or whatever it is for this? And I'm just just trust me. Trust me. I had that MacBook that lasted 5 years, lasted well after that, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know what became of it in its, elder days, but, yes. And my 2011 MacBook, Brittany is still using it every night. That's basically her laptop now. I mean, it's got its issues, but it's, it's a 7-year-old laptop and she's still using it. She uses it to teach online classes, at night and it works fine. And, you don't get that longevity with PCs. You just don't, unless you go really high end. And then at that point you're spending the same amount of money anyway. So, it's a toss up on what you want. But yeah, that I feel that pain for people because it's I get it. It's more, but 5 years later, it's still going to be working. You may not even be able to say that 5 months later with this cheap PC. I'm sorry. It's just, I don't know what to do. Yeah, I don't know what to do to help you.
It took the longest time. So I remember when I was in high school, this was probably 04, 05, so my freshman or sophomore year. And our current Dell was getting to the point where it needed to be replaced because it had been 3.5 years. And I remember trying to make that pitch to my parents of the fact that yes, you were going to spend more on a Mac, but it's going to last you longer and it's actually going to work and we're not going to have issues with it. And I mean, it was going to be darn near twice as expensive. I was but it will last at least twice as long. And they were I just can't do it, kid. Right? Just can't do it.
You'll be an adult someday, kiddo.
So they bought another Dell and this Dell had problems really, really quickly.
And I don't want to be bashing on Dell. I have had Dells through work that have been great machines, but they were you were paying $2,700 for these things. Yes.
I mean, if you spend a lot, then you still get a lot, right? And if you manage them well, there is a way to keep Windows PCs running pretty well for the most part.
But still, probably at least once every year or two, you're going to have to completely just restore it and start from scratch. That just happens.
Certainly helps. I mean, iOS devices are there too. We can talk about that.
That's true. Yeah.
And speaking of knowing how to manage things, if you don't know how to manage an iPhone and you get a 16 gigabyte device and it just fills up, like,
Yeah.
that will be no good on you too. But anyways, all that to be said, it's like, if you don't know how to manage something, the Mac was even better for you because it needed so much less management. So by the time 2010 rolled around, they bought a Mac Mini, and they are still using that Mac Mini. I replaced the hard drive with a solid state drive for them, I don't know, 3 years ago or so, but they're still using their 2010 Mac Mini for all of their computing. That's the way to go.
Why not?
That's it.
Get
man.
your own monitor. Get what you want.
Right.
You know?
I mean, they were like doing what Apple told you could do, is like, hey, you switch from PC to Mac and don't have to replace your monitor or your mice or your keyboard or any of that, you know? But my first Mac that I had, well, back up, another computer that I had was the Pentium 2 PC that I bought at the library.
Oh yeah, that you mentioned
in like my junior year,
in episode 0.
Junior year of college, or my senior year, not of college, but of high school. Senior year of high school. So I never really, I guess wireless networking was this, I mean, it was a thing in, we're talking like 06, like that's a thing, but I mean, we didn't have a wireless router, and I mean, you didn't really know about it unless, I guess I knew about wireless internet for laptops, and like that made sense because it's a laptop.
Yeah.
But it just never really occurred to me, and I never knew that there were these wireless adapters that you could plug in a desktop computer so that it could pick up wireless. And so I caught wind of this somehow, figured out that that there were these USB adapters you could just plug in, and then now you can get Wi-Fi to your desktop computer. And so I did that with this. So I bought this Pentium 2, 400 megahertz, 192 megabytes of RAM, 6 gigabyte hard drive that I promptly replaced with a 120 gigabyte hard drive from Best Buy, and just ran XP on it, and got like a $40 USB Wi-Fi adapter, and got my parents to get a wireless router. And then I had internet in my room, which was awesome. And I didn't have to compete with my brother for the computer, you know, if we just wanted to play games. Or I actually had I got a little box for Christmas that year so that I could plug like S-Video, I think it was like S-Video out to the TV I had in my room, and then like VGA back into the computer, so I could just like stream stuff, and it would be on my 32-inch TV that was in my room. So that was awesome.
You were pretty proud of yourself.
I was pretty proud of myself. Yes, I was making it happen.
So this was another weird experience for me. Is I get my first MacBook, I go to college, and you know, Apple was starting to become more ubiquitous. You know, you would start to see more and more people with,
especially on the college campus.
Yeah, but still,
those white MacBooks.
That first year, and maybe it was because I had the black one, but like I would have so many people just be like, "What is this thing?" You know, like, "What do you have?" You know, I remember my roommate that my freshman year just being like, "What's that?" You know, like it was just like this exotic creature that no one could understand or had seen. And then, of course, over the 4 years of being in college, you started to see, those white MacBooks just everywhere, right? Because that was like their entry model, I guess. And then, you know, you start to see the MacBook Pros coming in more and more. I know there was this one person that I had several classes with because we were both in kind of mass comm majors. I think he was in filmmaking, but we would had a lot of, especially those first few years, we had a lot of classes in common, and he had that 17-inch MacBook Pro, and I was just like, wow, you know, like I felt good about me being able to get this MacBook, but then I would look at that machine and just be like, man, that's like $2,800. Like, how did you do that? You know, like, I'm sure he was
huge.
I'm sure he had some help,
heavy too.
Yeah, and that was the other thing.
It's just amazing.
I could never understand the appeal of a 17-inch monitor. I just felt like that 13.3-inch.
Oh, there's an appeal, especially when you're, especially in like computer science.
Well, I never like even felt the draw to the 15-inch until I got one at work, and then I was like, oh God, I'm never going back to a 13-inch unless it's an iPad, but we can talk about that later.
That's interesting. So my first personal Mac that I owned. So I entered college, and with the scholarships I had, they would buy you a computer up to like $2,500 at some point during your scholarship years. And so I really just wanted to like save that for whatever reason. And because of what I really wanted to get was a 12-inch Powerbook. And so I found on the Mac Rumors, so the Mac Rumors Marketplace, I found the very last 12-inch Powerbook G4 that Apple released, and they released it in January of 2005, and they discontinued it in May of 2006. So I mean, this was like a year and a half year old machine when I bought it, but they had stopped making the 12-inch, and I bought it for $725, and it was like great condition. Like they shipped it to me like in the box, as if like with all the stuff like in its place, like as if, you know, as
like
if
it was
you were
new.
getting it from the store, you know? Because that's one of the great things about.
A side note, that experience of getting the brand new laptop and opening it. Oh my gosh. Like I remember Brittany came over, like it was this big deal, you know,
ceremony.
Like, oh man, I remember how awesome that felt. And yeah, like experiencing that with her, it was just this funny thing. Sorry.
Phenomenal.
Derailed you.
That's fine. So I bought this 12-inch Powerbook, and that's so I had that until my senior year. I used my $2,500 to buy a MacBook Pro after they came out with them in September of 2010. MacBook Pro 15-inch. But I mean, that 12-inch, I think it was only like 4.5 pounds, which back then was awesome. I mean, it was amazing. And it really was. I mean, it was great to carry around. Yeah, 4.6 pounds. And I mean, it was really, really, it was just a great computer to have in class and to like carry around in a backpack. And it was all about that computer. It only had an 80 gig hard drive, and I replaced it with a 250 gigabyte hard drive at one point. Well, the 12-inch Powerbook was a really small machine.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to replace anything in there. And I had to take out, I think it was 27 screws
wow.
to get to the hard drive. Mind you, in the 13-inch MacBook, all you had to do to get to the hard drive was take the back plate off.
Yeah.
With like 4 screws.
Yeah.
And then you could take it the hard drive. But the 12-inch Powerbook, I got on iFixit, and you had to take off the keyboard. You had to take off the top case, and then you had to take out like the hard drive bracket. And at one point, I did this at my sister and brother-in-law's house one time, because my brother-in-law's into computers too. So that's kind of the reason why that happened there. But at one point I was trying to unscrew the hard drive bracket screws. This is like the motherboard is open. Like I'm just trying to unscrew these screws like with a bare motherboard, and I stripped a screw.
Oh gosh.
And it would not come out. And the only way I was going to get the screw out is if I drilled into it right next to my motherboard. And so I did. And it was so scary because, I mean, but at that point, like I had taken, like this was like my next to last screw. I had taken out like 25 screws. So I was like, I can't just like put this back up together and not get this 250 gigabyte hard drive and just like put it up on the shelf. Like I can't do that. At the same time, like, am I really going to drill into this
One false move,
and like it's over. So it worked though. It worked. The sad reality was I didn't use that computer that much longer because that was in like 2009.
Yeah.
So I didn't use that computer that much longer after I had the 250 gigabyte hard drive in it. And also I got a Dell netbook when I got married. Actually, my wife got it for me in December of 09. And I think that was because like I had this upcoming class that I had to have a Windows.
Yeah, or she just didn't really know
PC
you
for. Oh, she knew me. As like she only used Mac. Like she never used PCs, and she has no interest.
Maybe
in
she was just
PCs.
trolling you.
No, I asked her for it because I think I had to use Windows, and like that was interesting thing about like PowerPC. Like I couldn't just emulate it on. I mean, I could, and like but really really slowly. But I couldn't just like use Boot Camp or anything.
Yeah,
because
that was another thing that was dangerous potentially dangerous about getting a Mac, right?
That's true.
Going to college is like, are you going to be able to do everything?
Yeah.
And I mean, in my major, broadcast journalism, being in that side, I never had an issue. Like not one time the entire 4 years was I not able to do something. And, I got some student edition of Office, so Brittany was able to do anything she needed to do. It was just writing reports and stuff. Like, I mean, I never felt like I was handicapped, in my classes by having a Mac. And that was always the thing I would hear from people was like, oh yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, you're not going to be able to do this or this or this. And like, yeah, if you went into information sciences or whatever, or I don't even know. MIS, what is that? I don't even know what that stands for. I work at a place
management information systems.
Systems. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Maybe I would have needed, a PC, but being an old silly broadcast journalism, I definitely didn't need it. That was a concern though, like especially at that time. I mean, now, it's definitely not as big of a deal now. I wouldn't think, but. Or like you said, you can just get Boot Camp or VMware or whatever and just have your Windows instance for when you need it.
Yep. But that's probably my favorite Mac ever, was that 12-inch Powerbook.
I had that question on here too, yeah.
Because it was the 12-inch MacBook of its day, but like 10 years earlier.
It was the MacBook Adorable.
Many years before that. It was. But it did have like a number of ports though, Yeah. And it was actually back in the day when it came with an a mini, I think it had mini VGA actually. A mini VGA to VGA adapter, and it came with a mini VGA to DVI adapter, like in the box.
Wow.
With it. It's pretty legit. Also came with a modem cable. That's not an Ethernet cable, but a modem cable.
I put down the question of, what's your favorite Apple computer that you've had? But now that actually, no, it's super easy for me. It's not a laptop, but so yeah, let's go down the list a little bit, right? So you had the I'm already blanking on the name.
The 12-inch Powerbook.
Okay, I was going to call it something else. So yeah, the 12-inch Powerbook, and then. Didn't you get like a 2010 MacBook Pro?
Got a 2010 MacBook Pro
at some point.
15-inch.
Yeah, I got my 2011 MacBook Pro 13-inch. And I guess the biggest regret I have about that is it was like pretty soon before I don't really remember when they switched to Retina. Was that 2015?
2012.
2012. Okay, yeah. So it was like a year before.
I mean, the 2012 Retinas were crazy expensive.
Yeah.
I'm on everymac.com, which is one of my favorite sites out there.
But you know
such
what?
a wonderful site.
Once you get a MacBook that has a Retina screen, like that's, as soon as I got that at work, right? When I was able to switch to a 2015 MacBook Pro at work, or actually I think I was on a 2014, but
you're correct.
Goodness gracious. Once you had that Retina screen, I couldn't use my 2011 anymore. Like not that I needed to anyway, but like I couldn't go back to that screen anymore. And, you don't think it's a big deal, but it's a big deal. It's such a big deal.
It is. And I mean, it's interesting. I don't use a Retina screen like at my job. And when you don't see them as often, it's just, you don't notice it as much, but
I've got old man eyes, man. I think
true.
I've been blessed
with good eyes, so I have that going for me. I say that like it was totally worth it to go Retina, but I mean it was also stuff. Your regular MacBook Pro in 2012 was $1799, and the cheapest Retina was $2199.
Oh gosh!
But it was pretty sparse. A configuration, it was like that entry level configuration where it's you're gonna go up from there, right?
It's easy for me to say that it's absolutely worth it when I haven't ever had to pay for one. I mean, I've always had them through work, so I had my 2014 15-inch MacBook Pro with Retina, fully spec'd. I'm, we both were lucky to work at a place that would get you the equipment you needed. I don't really think that you needed it as much as I did editing video, but like doing what you did, you were able to get it. And
listen, you get a lot of tabs open.
Oh yeah,
you got to have a lot of RAM.
You need that 16 gigs.
Oh, yeah. You must have it.
Oh, speaking of, side note, I mentioned the other day on a really public Slack channel at work, someone was complaining about RAM issues, and I don't even really remember what the problem was, but I was like, this app can be a RAM hog sometimes. I was like, I have 32 gigs on my iMac, which we'll get to in a second, and sometimes it'll having all like Slack and Blue Jeans and all these RAM hogs open, Outlook, it can get down pretty low even with 32 gigs, and some developer type was like, I want 32 gigs. And then I felt really bad because I'm like, this HR phony with my 32 gigs of RAM and these real developers out doing real work, real development work.
Did you just feel like you quickly needed to like post like video after video after video after video?
I know, yeah. Like, you don't understand. I mean, I need this video to encode, in 1 minute instead of
Slack,
5 minutes.
Blue Jeans, InDesign.
That's true.
Final Cut, Adobe Edition,
After Effects is the
Audition.
RAM hog of them all.
Right. I left out these. Sorry.
I felt bad. I felt really bad. But he's like, I wish I had 32 gigs of RAM. So yeah, I've only ever bought two Apple computers: the MacBook in 2006, the Black Book as it has been known, and then my 2011 MacBook Pro. When I came back from Denver and had a little bit of cash to blow.
So that's interesting. So the only I bought a $725 used 12-inch PowerBook. I had the school buy me a $2,500 MacBook Pro. And other than that, I've never bought myself a personal Mac. Those are the only two Macs I've ever had. Now, so Blair, my wife, started grad school, and so we bought her a MacBook Escape. But I mean, that's like the cheapest model, and they just brought it down before we bought it, which was great. So I mean, that was like $12.90. No, it was $14.99 because we got 16 gigabytes of memory, as any computer worth its salt should have.
I wish I had 32 gigs of RAM. But, so I mean, you kind of, you're not using it, but you did purchase it.
Certainly.
Yeah, so got the 2014 MacBook Pro at work, 15-inch, and then, gosh, I don't even remember when. Guess it's been almost a year when I got the 2016 15-inch MacBook Pro that used to belong to you when we worked at the same place.
Yeah, 13 months.
Yeah,
about 9 days.
It's really odd. Like, obviously there's a whole, hubbub about the keyboard on these things and on the MacBook.
It's a great keyboard.
The MacBook Adorable. And, I've had the issue pop up where a key gets stuck and it
really,
several of them actually. It's happened I'd say to at least 3 keys.
So how long does it get stuck for you?
Not very long. That's the thing is like, it's never,
you can crush it into oblivion.
I guess. It's never an extended nuisance.
Yeah.
Some of that maybe though, because I have this 2015 27-inch 5K iMac that is my primary machine at work. And so this this 2016 MacBook Pro is really my secondary machine. And if I'm being honest, a lot of days it's like not even my secondary machine because
your tertiary machine.
Yeah, I'll use this iPad Pro.
Yeah.
Depending on what I'm doing. Like if I'm at home and I need to edit video or do something like that, then yeah, I'm on the MacBook Pro. But if I'm at home and I'm just doing email or Netflix or whatever, I'm gonna get on the iPad. Like, I mean, that's just what it is. Or if I'm doing a game, I take the iPad Pro. Like, I mean, that's my machine I work from now. Just depends on what workflow I'm engaging at the moment. But I think that helps make the issue not as prevalent because I'm not on it. It's not my primary machine. I mean, I do spend quite a bit of time on it, especially this last month when I've been working from home so much. But it's not my primary machine when I'm at the office. It's that big, beautiful beast of a 5K wonder and splendor, that iMac, man.
It's very nice.
That's my favorite Mac of all time, and it's not even mine. Like, I mean, it's the company's machine, but it's my baby, and I have you to thank for that one too, because like I didn't even think about it, and but I was doing a lot more video work, and I'm glad I did get it because I mean that's like all I do now is making videos, and it certainly helps for screen capture and for output, and I do a lot of design work now too that I wasn't doing as much at the time, but I love that thing. Like this past month when I've been at home, I just didn't go in. Like usually if I'm going to have a long stretch of time, like when I had paternity leave, the 8 weeks, I took that thing to my house because that's how much I love that machine. And, if something ever happened and I was no longer employed at this great company that gives me my Apple products, I would find a way, to get one. If I ever did get forced into becoming a full-time self-employed person someday, I would need that machine to do the type of work that I would be doing at that point. And man, oh man, I love it. I would love to get an iMac Pro someday. I don't really know what the Mac Pro is going to be or if it would even hold any real interest to me. Like, I feel like the iMac Pro and the iMac that I have now is plenty of machine for me. I am starting to shoot 4K, and those fans start spinning as soon as I start, playing through files. So long term, I think, I could see the need for a machine like an iMac Pro or whatever the Mac Pro ends up being, but the Mac Pro is going to be ridiculously expensive. Not that the iMac Pro is cheap, but
likely so.
I mean, even that standard config would be pretty good option for my needs. But this iMac now is doing good. I mean, the 4K video slows it down a little bit, but nothing too noticeable yet. I just love that machine, man. And people give me such a hard time about it. But it's like everything that a Mac, that Apple thinks is important, right? This beautiful screen and this, this power to do the creative type of things that you want to do. I mean, obviously I could do this on, a Dell spec'd out, 15-inch laptop or whatever they have. I don't think anyone at the company has 15-inch Dells. They're all like 13-inch, aren't they?
I feel like they were 14 inches.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. But, man, I literally come to work every day, and I'm happy when I get in front of that machine. And when people give me a hard time about, oh, you're just the Apple fanboy, I'm like, do you feel any joy when you sit down at your desk and turn, open that screen or whatever it is you do with those laptop things? Because when I hit that button and I hear that chime and I see this 5K wonder in front of me, I'm happy. And then, I start working and it goes away. But for that moment in time, I'm like, I could do this. Like, I could do this every day. This machine is wondrous. And when it ages out, I don't know what I'm going to do because that thing is not going in the lottery. Like, I don't know how I'm going to make that happen. But if that gets in the lottery and some rando out in the world gets it, that's just...
You have to find the rando.
That's just going to be double. That's going to be too much for me. I'll just hold on to it. I'll just not let them...
You'll find a way.
Not let them put it in the lottery ever.
You'll find a way.
Oh, man. That's my favorite Mac, though. And it's not even mine. Like, I don't even own it.
Yeah. But it's yours.
It's glorious.
As far as usage goes.
And it's so funny to me because it's like, as much as I love iPads and that experience, and you know, my first Mac was a laptop, and I never would have thought that I would have this love affair with a desktop computer. You know, like I thought those days were just way gone. But when I'm editing video, there's nowhere else I would rather be than in front of that screen. And man, like it cracks me up when I think about how the world has changed with iOS, that is my favorite device, that this big behemoth has become my favorite device when I think about this isn't the future. Like this is not the future of computing, but man, I love this thing.
It's still the future of video editing though, I think.
Yeah, if you want to do it in
actual
style.
Real video editing. I mean, yeah, you can...
You don't want to be in this big, huge edit bay, like working on Avid or whatever. Like if you want to be cool while you're doing video, then yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that desktop computers will probably live the longest for. I mean, probably development, design, and photo and video editing.
Yeah. Man, oh man. I love it so much. It's just like this real joy when I get in front of it. I'm like, oh man, I love this machine.
Great computer.
Yeah,
it's gorgeous.
Oh man, it looks really good at my house. So whenever I have opportunities, I did joke around about getting a case for it because
an eye lugger.
The several times that I have moved it, it has gone unharmed. But one time when I had to move desks, like officially at work.
Oh, I remember that.
And they just, the movers that came in to move my stuff, they just thought it was a monitor, which, oh my God, like, don't even want to go down the thoughts I had there. They just thought it was a monitor, and they put it in this huge trash bin with all the other cheap Dell monitors. And when it got to they brought it to my desk, set it down, and walked away, and it had a huge crack in the screen. I'm like, what are you guys, are you going to pretend like you don't see this, this huge, this horrible thing that you did to my computer? They just set it down and walked away. I actually moved again, in April, you know, when I moved back to HR, and, I moved it myself. I mean, like, there was no way I was going to let them move it after that. Never again. And I mean, they like, there have been some really ludicrous things that have happened with, because our desks are they're not, you know, stuck cubes anymore, right? I mean, they're modular, and the desks themselves you could just move. Like there's nothing holding it down or like really keeping it down. So other people moved recently before I moved back to HR, and they just moved their entire desk. Like they, you know, just because it was literally just one down and across, and they got in trouble for doing that. Like, because when the movers came, it was already done. And then the movers complained to, you know, whoever. And then, like, they had to reprimand the people that did that. Guess who did not get reprimanded? Me. Because the same guy that moved it, the same guy that brought it to me when it was broken, was moving me that day. And he was like, oh, I saw you already moved your iMac. I hid it. I wasn't going to bring it out until they were done bringing my boxes. But he knew who I was. And he's like, I saw that it wasn't down there, so I assumed you moved it. And I was like, yeah, I did.
Happened to have done that.
Nothing happened. I didn't get reprimanded then.
Say anything more about that? Yeah. I didn't think so.
Didn't want another $600 repair for my screen.
My goodness.
But that's a deep tangent. But anyway, I'm very protective of it. And but I would say now, I mean, other than that, like my favorite device just in day-to-day use that, I mean, it's hard because I love this phone, right? I really love the 10, but in terms of like real computing needs, or when I'm just relaxing and consuming media or whatever, I really like this 13-inch MacBook, or this 13-inch iPad Pro 12.9, whatever you want to call it. I didn't realize how much I would like that size. I mean, you said it earlier, it's perfect as a desk iPad, right? So if I'm calling a game, it's perfect for switching back and forth between Twitter and notes and, just keeping up with what I'm seeing, out on the field or whatever. Like it's the perfect travel machine for specific needs like that, where you're not like, I would never want to edit video on this, but maybe someday that'll be possible. I don't know. I mean, if Adobe ever gets their act together and puts, professional level products on it, then I could see a future where that happens. I could see, cutting and splicing and all that stuff with a pencil but just day-to-day use, I really think I'm to a point where I prefer this iPad Pro over the MacBook Pro in general use. Obviously, I'm not going to edit a video or do any of that on it, but I would say it's my favorite all-purpose device is this 13-inch. I keep saying 13, the 12.9 iPad Pro. And if rumors are to be believed, the things that are going to happen to these iPads in this next release, I mean, they're gonna be amazing. So I don't know how I'm gonna manage making that happen someday, but yeah, I really like these more. And I bought a 9.7-inch iPad Pro before I got my hands on this, through other circumstances that happened. But it's just a hair too small. I'm sure the 10.5 inch is just the right size typing. I don't know. I mean, I haven't used one, but I have played with that smart keyboard and it does feel just a little bit more true, but like I have no problems taking this to, it's a perfect companion for like conferences. I mean, I've taken it to a couple conferences and it's wide enough that it fits well in your lap and it's sturdy enough with the smart keyboard to type. Like it's not this weird experience of, trying to force the iPad to do something that really I should be using a laptop for. It's not like that. I mean, it really can serve those purposes and it's so light. I mean, when it's the only thing in my bag, like if I go to a game or like when I went to these conferences, when it's the only thing in your bag, it's like, are you even wearing a backpack? Like it feels weird. You feel like something's wrong, but it's just so different needs wise from the phone that, I mean, I would much rather watch video and do, obviously because it's a bigger screen, but I don't know. Like it's funny to me how segmented purposes have become for the different devices when I have access to basically all of them that I would want. I mean, I'm a really spoiled kid in my work life and in my personal life, but I didn't expect to love the big iPad as much as I do.
I mean, that's interesting when you talk about usage of devices, because I don't use much more than my phone very often. Outside of, at work, I use my PC and 2 monitors, and I have to have a PC at work for what we do, and I'm all right with that. But I mean, I don't use my iPad very often at all. I would use an iPad mini more often, but that's just a dead end street. I mean, that's even more. That's arguably even more of a dead end than the SE, to be determined. But I mean, the iPad mini has much less of a chance than the SE of ever being updated, of there ever being a place to go with it, which is sad. And I don't quite understand. I mean, the biggest argument against the mini is that it's just so much less apt for multitasking which is where iOS and the iPad is going. But at the same time, no matter how many multitasking features they built in to iPads, a significant percentage of iPad users are never going to use more than one app.
For sure.
I mean, darn near, I would guess a majority of iPad users have, in the last year of their iPad usage, never used more than one app. I mean, I would just think based on just normal people's usage, because most people are using their iPads as a big phone in most cases.
Yeah.
Right. And especially because there is some management that has to be done and some understanding that has to be had to use multitasking on the iPad. It's far less intuitive, I think, than the Mac and its Windows, because Windows, you can just drag to arbitrary places and people understand how computers work because you have to, I mean, that's historically.
Are you saying this isn't a computer?
You historically understand how personal computers have been used and traditional desktops.
Yes.
But I don't think, intuitive.
That will change though. That will change over
as
time
people die off.
Yeah.
But I think, I wonder, I should ask my dad. My dad has an iPad Mini 4 that he loves and uses a good bit, but I bet you he never uses multiple apps on that.
It's just not a good experience on that small of a screen.
No, but even, that's almost separate from that conversation. Even I think if he had a 9.7, he would still he would pull up this app to read the news and read the sports and look at the scores.
It really comes down to use cases of, certain things that you're doing where you would benefit from having to.
Almost more like approach to computing than use cases, an approach to multitasking. And the one thing that Syracuse talks about a lot that annoys him so much is Windows almost encourages, and has for its whole entire being, encourages maximizing one window and having that be the one window that you use. And granted, you're talking about history of computing, when you start off with 13-inch, 11-inch CRT monitors in the early days of our PC usage, it really didn't make sense to have more than one window on there, plus the fact that you could really only run so many apps in those early days with as many resources as you had before things got really, really bogged down. So I think early on, people were a little bit more sensible to maximize one window. Now it is a little bananas. And I guess I say that maybe the snap features that have been a part of Windows since Windows 7, which I love and use liberally, maybe those snap features do have people using iPad multitasking more than I think they would, because honestly, that's how
it's kind of similar. Yeah.
That's very similar to how iPad multitasking is initiated.
The other problem with iPad multitasking is I still don't understand how it works every time, because it's who knows what's happening. And when it if you get a certain combination and then it keeps remembering that combination, and I'm no, I just want to pull up Slack full screen. But when I click Slack, it comes up back in that familiar, configuration that I had. And I don't understand how to break it or how to set up a new one. And, some apps, they only do slide over. They don't do, the true multitasking, as it were. It's I can't, and if I can't comprehend it, if I don't have a task on it as someone that tries to use it, then how is just a general iOS user gonna ever figure it out?
Absolutely.
It's frustrating.
It's a tough problem to solve. I think it is really a good implementation of windowless multitasking.
One place I always took my iPad was where I would really use the multitasking was anytime I was taking some kind of notes, right? So whatever that is, meetings, church, whatever, wherever I would be taking notes. But I've noticed that since I got the 10, I don't take the iPad with me, like, unless I'm at work, like if I'm at work where I already have the iPad, I'll take it to meetings instead of my laptop or whatever. But if I'm out away from a work setting and it's not somewhere where I would just naturally take the iPad with me anymore, I'm not. Like, so a perfect example of that is church. So now I just, because the quick switching between apps is so much easier, and is it just the 10 or is it iOS 11 in general? Okay, so
just 10.
Yeah, the way you can just quickly, switch back and forth between the most recently used apps, it's just notes, Bible, notes, but like I don't feel the need to carry that iPad with me anymore, even though it was a great device. That 9.7 inch or the 10.5, like whatever you have, was a great device for doing that. And I would prefer to have the keyboard. I would be much more accurate and quicker with my notes. But it's just like, is it worth the hassle of carrying that with me? And when I I'm always going to have my phone. Like, that's not a question. So I have found that since I have the 10, I use multitasking a lot less just in general, because the use cases where I would use it, I don't feel the need to always have it with me now, because one little design implementation because of how the phone is now, and it's going to spread. It's only going to keep going like that. The phone is kind of eating into some of my specific iPad usage that I had.
It's an interesting.
We haven't even talked really about the 10, which, I mean, if I had to say, now my Mac history is a lot more condensed than, or a lot more sparse, I should say, than my iPhone history, because I've had an iPhone since the 3G every 2 years until I broke that mold this past year. So I've had way more experience and just exposure to the various iPhone models than I have, buying laptops every generation or, iPads. I did buy an original iPad. This was back in my Denver days when I was making some good cash, and it was just no big deal to go get an iPad. So I had that first model, and then I upgraded to the iPad 2 because it was just insanely thinner. But then I didn't end up getting a new iPad until the Mini 2, the first Mini that had Retina. I just was drawn to that Mini size for some reason. I don't even really remember. I think it was because like we had our first child, and I was like, this is going to be easier for them to hold and use, as they're growing up. And then through some weird accident, it got crushed, and I took it to get fixed, and the people that fixed it like just completely killed it. And so they gave me...
Wasn't a child involved in...
Yeah,
weird accident?
A child was involved in the crushing, but the weird accident to me is that I took it to get fixed, and they destroyed it. Yes. And so then they just gave me an Air, and so I had that for a while. And then when the iPad Pros came out, I didn't think I would be interested in the 12.9. I used it occasionally, we would share it some, but when the 9.7 was announced, and I just felt like that form factor would be more what I would want to take around and use for specific things. And so I bought that, used it a lot, that first year. And then, I got my hands on the 12.9 after you left, and I don't even use that 9.7 anymore. It's just kind of become the kids' iPad, they don't get to use it very often because it's a pretty expensive iPad that I don't want them to have another accident with. But the most it gets used now is when we travel, and I put it it becomes Everly's screen when we're driving long distances and she needs something to distract her from screaming, which is a pretty sad use for it now, but that's just what's happened because this 12.9 inches has become the apple of my eye. Yeah. As I was saying that, I was like, oh God, am I saying this? This is happening. Yeah, this is really happening.
Oh boy.
But the 10, I mean, it's by far my favorite iPhone that I've had. I mean, it has its flaws for sure, but just first off, I mean, once you go to the edge to edge screen, there's no going back from that. Like, so don't get one unless you're ready. And eventually that's going to be the standard. Like that's just going to spread out. You know, it's not like they're going to not keep expanding that in some way.
I just wonder if the SE size is going to be around when it goes all that way, because I can see a real possibility that they either never come out with another SE or they come out with,
in which case you're just going to have to get over it. You're just going to have to dive in.
I will, because at some point it's going to be, it's going to be untenable to not update to something. And if I updated to something, I would update to the 10 or the 10S or whatever it may be. And there's a lot more to be gained from a two-handed phone in the 10 than there is in the 6, 7, 8 form factor. So I feel like what I'm giving up is actually getting me more in return. I mean, that's really, so I started with the 3GS and started always a generation behind because I started on T-Mobile and unlocking devices and avoiding paying for data plans.
It's crazy to me that, you know, like the iPhone didn't really expand until the 4. And it was crazy. It was late in the 4 cycle. I mean, before wild. Verizon got it, it
February,
was Yeah. I mean, it's just I guess I just was lucky enough to have always been on Singular, and then, you know, what became AT&T.
Yeah.
It's just like, people don't think about that. Like, it really was, you know, it didn't expand and become this behemoth until, you know, it's really its 4th edition.
Yes and no. I mean, it was a well-selling phone. I mean, it was the most sold phone.
I mean, it was doing well, but it wasn't this globally just everyone, you know, it just exploded, right? I mean, at a certain point, it just poof, and then it just kept going up and up and up, and then, you know, we're starting to get more into the level off point. But
so I should actually start off with, before the iPhone 3GS, I bought.
Because that LG flip phone, right? Yeah.
Well, so I had an LG flip phone, and I bought the iPod Touch the first week it came out. Bought it from the computer store at the University of Arkansas, because what I wanted, like, anybody that I knew when I first got to college, which was the fall after the iPhone came out in June, end of June. Anybody who had an iPhone, like, I would just want to just like use it for any amount of time. Like, I remember I was actually working in the movie theater the summer that it came out, and when I would get my 35-minute break, then I would just go to the AT&T store and just play with the iPhone for 35 minutes is what I would do. Then I would get back to work. But I mean, I loved the form factor. I mean, it was great. I mean, it was we wouldn't have to be the 1,000 people to say the iPhone was a revelation. But like, I wanted that, but I did not want to pay for, like, a data plan, as expensive as it was back then, was not worth me paying for. It just wasn't worth that. And so I bought the iPod Touch, and I used the iPod Touch. Like, in my pocket from that point on was my iPod Touch and my flip phone. And especially on the college campus, like, you had Wi-Fi all over the campus, which is great. And so I would use it just, all over campus, which is where I was almost all the time. And And there was this weird Wi-Fi network I could pick up from the Walmart behind the movie theater I worked at in the summer during college. And so sometimes I could pick up that Wi-Fi network, and that was kind of strange. But so you would do a lot of searching for Wi-Fi networks with your iPod Touch, and did a lot of that. But I loved that form factor. It was great. And eventually I got to the iPhone 3GS. But I got to the iPhone 3GS after the iPhone 4 came out, because you couldn't unlock the latest version because the exploits wouldn't come out in time. So anyways, you had to stay a generation behind. And it did pain me to a great extent, because the Retina screen, of all the Retina screens, the iPhone Retina screen is the biggest difference in the...
Well, and it was the first.
And it was the first, absolutely. So maybe that has a lot to do with it. It was just the fact that, like, not seeing those pixels and then having a phone where you could just see them all over the place.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that, like, the 4 was just a great material design.
Yeah.
Unless you wanted to, like, keep a phone call, you know.
I never had that problem. I didn't make a lot of phone calls. But.
Certainly. So, I mean, I would, like, if I, like, stuck the phone in the palm of my hand in that corner, like, I could have the issue. But if you just held it right, then you didn't have the issue. And actually, I got a bumper, and the bumper's the best case. I loved the bumper case. Big fan of the bumper case, and I really wish they made a bumper for phones still. But so then I got the iPhone 4 a year after I got the 3GS, when the 4S came out, and it was a year behind. And so I could get it and unlock it and do the whole rigmarole, and use that for a couple of years. And then we went official, because we moved to Conway and we had no T-Mobile service at our house, like, just none. And so we went official and got iPhone 5s on Verizon, and used the iPhone 5 for 2 years. A great phone factor. And then I got the iPhone 6 when the iPhone 6 came out, because 2 years was up, and there's this great new form factor. And I just always felt like, and CGP Ray and Brady Heron have talked about this to a certain extent, that, like, that 4.7 inch was just, like, seemed like in between what it needed to be for me, because it's a really small two-handed device for me.
Yeah.
And it's a really too big one-handed device.
I think I've realized why this is not an issue for me through the course of this. God knows how long we've been talking at this point. Well over 2 hours now, but I think I've realized why I have such a hard time understanding your, whatever it is that you're caught up with. It's because I never, ever, ever type with one hand. Never. And I've never had a desire to. Like, I've never had a desire to try those other keyboards. Anytime I'm ever typing, it's always with two hands.
Did you type with two hands on the 3.5 inch?
Every phone, yeah.
Really?
Because I'm faster with two hands than I am with just one. I'm much more. I can do it much more quickly with two hands. Because it's kind of like typing on a keyboard where this thumb only does these certain letters and this thumb only does these certain letters. I never have. I'm sure there's times when I'm just like, okay, with one hand,
right.
But like. Anytime I'm typing, I'm always using two hands.
That's interesting. So, I wonder how much of this is, and actually, I wonder where this lands with you, is that a great bit of my experience with phones, and actually, so the 6 came out in 2014, and we had our second child in 2014. So a lot of my phone usage is while taking care of kids, and that's one reason why sometimes I only have one hand to be using a phone with. And so it can be so much more convenient for me to have a device that I can use one-handed. When I'm just like feeding kids with bottles, it's like, well,
Yeah. For browsing and doing Twitter and stuff, yeah, I just use one hand. But anytime I'm going to be typing something or sending a message, it's an automatic, the other hand comes in. Like, it's just never a thing for me. I mean, I use the phone with one hand a lot for like getting to things. Yeah. And like playing podcasts or whatnot. But anytime I'm going to be like, if I'm taking notes on it, two hands, no question. Like, I'm just so much more efficient with two hands. It's just never even entered my mind to try just, typing with one hand. And so that, like, I understand now why I have this disconnect with you about this, because it's never been an issue for me. I was kind of got on the similar path as you, right? I was a 3G though. And so 3G was my first phone, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. Like, I mean, I just every 2 years. So when it did expand with the 6, it just never was a problem for me. I mean, certainly there are certain things where it's uncomfortable to have, try and use it with one hand. I think particularly if I'm laying down, that's difficult. Anytime I need to get up in that upper left corner, it's hard, right? If I'm just laying down and using one hand. But I think that's why I just never have understood people's hang-ups with that. But I think it has to do with just typing for me has always been two hands. And then to go from the 4.7 to a slightly different form factor, but it's almost, for me, it's almost different enough that it is just not even those areas where it was a problem with the 6 and the 7. Now it's so much higher and up to the left that I'm never going to even try it. So like this form factor, it takes away even those minor annoyances. They're still annoyances, I guess, but they don't even become annoyances because I just know I'm never going to try and do it with one hand. So I guess I've just like caved into, the future they've given me, and I'm not questioning my reality, but
that's a good way to be. That's a good way to be.
Compliance is great. Ready to comply. I'm like the Winter Soldier.
Spoiler.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot you were.
I'm a little behind.
By the way, come on. Yes, you need to watch all the other movies before you see Infinity War. I mean, I made a list for you, and you could just watch those movies and not watch the others and be fine. But at that point, you're watching 11. You might as well watch the other. Well, first of all, those 11 primary, you've got to watch them before you watch Infinity War. There are maybe 3 or 4 others that I think you should absolutely watch, but aren't as important to seeing Infinity War because they're just more siloed stories. They're still great. But at that point, like you've watched 14 or 15, yeah, you might as well watch the other 3 and then, go see Infinity War. So
we'll see. I mean, it just sounds like Infinity Wars.
I think it's Infinity Wars.
Okay, that's what I thought. Know. It sounds to me like Infinity Wars had some interesting happenings and maybe worth seeing. And I just felt like, well, but do I have to just totally start from the beginning?
But there's so many, it's like the ultimate team up movie. Like they've had a few team up movies, already.
Yeah.
But this is like the ultimate team up movie because it's basically 3 separate storylines going on with just groups of people, right? And so you get some interesting pairings that some of them we've had before, but some of them we haven't. And so seeing all these different characters interact in these unique pairings.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't it's not going to be as impactful if you don't know these characters.
Absolutely.
So I'm just trying to help you out.
I have a hard time with superhero movies because they seem just really formulaic.
But Marvel movies are great. Even if they are formulaic, they're always consistently pretty good to good.
They're great. I mean,
there are some that are great.
They're always maybe so. I mean,
Civil War is great. Winter Soldier is great. Spider-Man Homecoming is great.
Spider-Man Homecoming was great. I really enjoyed
Spider-Man Homecoming. Not to spoil a future episode at some point, but that might be my favorite Marvel movie out of the lot. Hey. I really love that movie.
Yeah, it
was good. It was better than good, but it was just the whole time I was watching, I was like, yes, this is the Spider-Man movie that we deserve.
That's absolutely true.
It
I
was-
did see, I saw Deadpool a couple days ago, and I saw Deadpool 2 the next day. And
But not a part of the MCU.
they were
so,
going to know.
you know.
And I will say about Deadpool, it was, so there are parts of it that are dirty, but they're like not, they're dirty to a point where it's like kind of easy to avoid. Like you can just look away from the screen because it's obvious what's about to happen, sort of stuff. And to a certain, like to a great extent, it's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek Marvel movie. I think it's kind of overplayed how just insanely
Over the top it is.
over the top it is. Yeah. I didn't feel like it was that much so.
I wouldn't know. I haven't seen them, but a lot of that has to do with my irrational dislike for Ryan Reynolds. I don't even know what it is about him, but I'm just like, no, I don't want to see this. I don't know. I don't know. It's never going to happen. Westworld update. Where are you?
Still on episode 1.
Are you? Have you finished it?
I finished episode
Oh,
1.
gosh.
Yeah.
Man,
He killed them all.
you gotta catch up, man.
I know.
4 and 5 are great.
I'm looking forward to them.
The first 3 episodes,
Set up for 4 and 5.
Well, and it's just it's fun because, you know, like obviously season 1, you may not have been aware, but at a certain point you become aware that it's multiple timelines, right? Or 2 timelines going on. It becomes clear later in the season that that's what's happening, but some people like they get through it and they're like they don't even realize, right?
I didn't realize until very late.
Yeah, I mean,
1.
I kind of felt like maybe that's what was happening, but yeah, I mean, you're not sure until pretty late in the game. But going into this season, I'm like, how are they going to capture that same like mechanism, that same, because that made it fun. It made it really fun to watch it a second time because you're like, oh gosh, like there are even still scenes where you're like, is this like which timeline is this? Because you know some of the characters, spoiler, are robots, so you don't know. Like you don't know. You know,
It's not really a spoiler. As much
I know.
As
I'm just joking because there's one that is a robot that you don't know is a robot, and
are they really just robots?
Well, hey, come on now. But season 2 has been able to still replicate this multiple timeline thing, but it's just like a week difference or a couple weeks difference, you know, through this mechanism with Bernard, you know, having these memory leaks or however they called it. And then they, yeah, as you get in, they have some flashbacks that are even further back, but it's been good. And they've gotten to a point where they kind of tip their hand a little bit on, you know, kind of the at least the end game of this season, but maybe the end game of the entire show. And it's like, why didn't I realize that this is where this was heading? You know, like I just had this moment of wow, I didn't even really think of that. But now that I see it, it's like, of course, this is where this is heading. And now I'm like all in, let's get there, you know, and it's probably not going to get fully there by the end of the season. But like, I can now see a point of, oh, this is how it can keep going. Cause it's a show ultimately that, you know, it can't go on forever. Like, you know, it's much of a Lost type show where you really kind of have to hone it in and figure out how many seasons you're going to do because you can't just keep going with this story. But now, episode 4 kind of gives you that tip, and you're like, okay, and you're either in or you're not. And I think most people who would watch a show about robots and becoming, you know, aware, you're probably going to be in with this story in season 2.
I look forward to it.
But you're not going to be in with it if you don't watch the episodes. And we can't ever talk about them on this wonderful podcast that several ones of people might listen to if you're not watching the episodes.
I'll get on that.
I'm going to prioritize those above the Marvel movies.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay.
Because we got a whole year until the next Avengers movie. So we got plenty of time for you to watch 18 movies. 19, I guess, with Infinity Wars. And you don't have to watch them all because you've watched some of them. The ones you've watched before, you can just get a little recap video or something. You don't have to watch them all. Watch all 18.
Yeah. I'm going to do it. I might as well do it.
Westworld, man. Just watch it.
I enjoy Westworld. I'm going to get back to that. 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 I'm going to get back to that.